Welcome, friends, to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery. As usual, I'd like to begin by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So welcome all those who are joining the live stream and to those who tune in later to this Dhamma session. So the title today of the talk, Exploration of Dhamma, is A True Friend. And I was just reflecting, actually, as I was chanting just now, our truest friend perhaps is the Buddha, our true friend and guide, the teacher, the one who showed the way, so that we could all follow in his footsteps to attain the ultimate peace, the ultimate freedom that is Nibbana. The Buddha is perhaps our truest friend, but there are many accounts in the Buddhist teachings of great friendships amongst, Sangha members, and even going back many lifetimes. When we look at the Jataka tales, these stories, birth stories, from the Buddha's recollection of so many past lives, we see that the same characters, the same people keep coming back to be together, to practice together. And whatever we think of this, it's just a very beautiful consideration that friendships are lasting and can perhaps span lifetimes of experience, and that we continue to relate until we perfect those relationships. Perhaps we can learn how to relate more and more skillfully through our following of the Buddha's teachings, for sure. Anyway, today I want to speak on two suttas, which I posted in the chat for you to read again later and consider, because of course I can only touch the surface of these teachings in the time that we have. These two suttas that I've chosen to speak about today, the Anthill Sutta and the Bahia verses from the Udana, they're connected because these two characters, Bahia and Kumara, who features in the Anthill Sutta, were not friends in the lifetime at the time of Gautama the Buddha, but were said to be friends back at the time, the era of Kassapa the Buddha, the previous Buddha, a long, long time ago. So long ago that there's no documentation or recollection of such a time. Who knows how that works? But Kassapa, the previous Buddha, had many disciples, and amongst his disciples, at the time of his dispensation, there was a group of 5 or 7 practitioners who became monks, who made a vow together. They vowed that they would follow the Buddha's example when he was the Bodhisattva. On the night that he became the Buddha, he made a vow. As many of you will know, the Bodhisattva, Siddhartha Gautama, made a vow that he would sit under the Bodhi tree and he would not move until he became fully liberated. He must have known that he was on the verge of realization and that he was very close, and this determination would help to see him through to the great insight required. And so he made the vow, I'll sit here even if my muscles, my sinews dry up, even if basically I die. I'm not going to move from this spot. And these 7, some accounts there are 5, in some accounts there are 7. These 7 monastic friends decided that they were going to go for it. And they climbed to the top of a hill, and they sat there together and they practiced, and they vowed that they wouldn't leave the place until they had realized the fullness of the Buddha's teachings. And story goes, one of them became an arahant. One of them became a non-returner, so very close to full liberation. And the other 5 didn't succeed in this quest, and so sadly, their bodies passed away through lack of food or lack of water. And despite the fact that they were not successful in this attempt to break through to Nibbana, we can't force these things, really, can we, friends? Necessarily. Perhaps strong determinations have a place, though, because although they were not successful in their attempt, that consciousness, that energy, that determination carried through. And story goes, at the time of Gautama the Buddha, our Buddha, the Buddha that we know, this age, all 5 of them who were not successful were born into conducive human situations where each of them became bhikkhus, became monks at the time of Gautama the Buddha. And so I'm going to speak about 2 of them who knew nothing about each other. None of them knew each other. It's interesting that they didn't have the memory or recollection of any of this as human beings. But each of them had the determination, the wish to seek the truth, to come to a place of peace, to come out of suffering. So they're born in all different places. And one of them was born in a place called Bahia. And he was born in a family of merchants. And he himself was a merchant, became a trader, and he was a seaman. He went on ships carrying, goods from India, where he lived, across to what's now Myanmar, Burma. And he traveled up and down the Indus River and across the Indian Ocean trading. And he was successful, made many trips. But on one trip, Bahia was involved in an accident. The ship capsized. He was stranded. He managed to swim to shore. I think the story goes he was the only survivor of this shipwreck. And he landed on an island. He didn't know anybody there. He didn't have anything. So he became a beggar. He became a mendicant. And he didn't have any clothing. So he wore bark. He got bark from a tree, and he was wearing bark and carrying a bowl and living like a mendicant. And people began to relate to him as a wise person. And he wasn't very taken by this. He wasn't swept up by this kind of veneration, but he was very changed by his experience of losing everything. And truly, he became a wise person and a wanderer. And he even got to the point where he thought he may be an arahant, he may be fully liberated. At which point, Bahia was visited by the one of the group of 7 who had made that determination so long ago, the one who became a non-returner, this Deva, this heavenly being. So this almost fully successful member of the group was, in the time of Gautama the Buddha, was a Deva who visited Bahia to put him straight out of friendship, knowing as a Deva he had a greater understanding and recollection, and he knew that this was his old friend. He knew that Kumara, the next character I'm going to speak about, was an old friend, and he visited these two to help them along on the spiritual path. In the case of Bahia, the Deva visited and explained to him, indeed, he was not an arahant. He was far from arahantship, but there was one person, Gautama the Buddha, who he could learn from, who would show him the way to liberation. So because of this visitation from this old and true friend, Bahia made his way to where the Buddha was and indeed received teachings from him. The other character I'm going to speak about, Kumara, again was born in very favorable circumstances at the time of Gautama the Buddha. Due to this perhaps past determination, the good karma that had been made by his willingness to even practice until death, not to let up in any way in that lifetime back at the time of Kassapa the Buddha. So this Kumara was born, actually conceived in the womb of a woman who had the strong intention, motivation to become a bhikkhuni. So she did. She became a bhikkhuni, not knowing that she was pregnant at the time. And story goes, she gave birth to this boy. And as a bhikkhuni, she really wanted to be able to focus on her practice, to let go of this motherhood that she had not reckoned on. And fortunately, she lived in a supportive place. The conditions were good and favorable. And the local king, King Pasenadi, offered to adopt this baby boy. And he made him a prince. And so his mother, Kumara's mother, the bhikkhuni, could quite comfortably let go and continue to practice as a monastic. So Kumara was brought up as a prince with his father, King Pasenadi. Very fortunate conditions. He had the wish to go forth under the Buddha. King Pasenadi, as many of you will know, was a devout disciple of the Buddha. All of the family, royal family, were practitioners. And so Kumara had the Dhamma introduced into his mind, heart at a very young age. Of course, his mother was practicing as a bhikkhuni. He himself wanted to ordain, and as soon as he could, at just before the age of 20, he became a bhikkhu. He became a bhikkhu just before the age of 20 and had some doubt whether he was properly ordained because he'd not reached the age of 20. This is the rule for monastics. We have to be over a certain age, and for men, the age is 20. The Buddha said to him, it's okay, you were conceived before the time that you were ordained. You were conceived and then you lived just more than 20 years. So we have a little clause, sub-clause in the Vinaya that we can go from the age of conception, from the age of the consciousness entering the womb. This counts in the Vinaya as, so we're a little bit older than our birth year, our birth time. We could say as much as perhaps 9 months older, depending on when the consciousness enters the womb. Anyway, Kumara became a bhikkhu then around the age of 20, and he was a great practitioner. He was brilliant. There's a discourse highly recommended, Digha Nikaya, long discourse, number 23, where Kumara features. He's having a conversation with a nihilist, whose name I can't remember. And he gives brilliant similes and explanations to help this person to come out of their annihilationist, nihilistic views and to open to the Dhamma teachings. So that's a wonderful discourse. So Kumara features in many places in the Pali Canon. He has verses in the Therigatha as well. And here in Majjhima Nikaya number 23, I'm going to speak about this sutta, Vammika Sutta. Kumara is visited by the very same Deva. He's one of the old friends from the hilltop. Kumara was one of the bhikkhus who passed away, who had not yet attained any kind of realization. And this Deva comes to visit Kumara. Even as a bhikkhu in the time of the Buddha, he's still not quite understanding how to practice in the right way. And so this Deva gives him a teaching and invites him to go and discuss with the Buddha, which he does. And this gives him the breakthrough. So again, this good, old, true friend from many, many lifetimes ago, both prompted Ayya to seek out the Buddha, and Kumara, Prince Kumara, who'd become a bhikkhu, to listen to a teaching and to talk to the Buddha about this teaching. Actually, in the Anthill Sutta, it's a kind of an extended simile, and I'm going to speak about this next. Very interesting sutta. It's very unusual. There's no other sutta quite like it. It's almost like a dream sequence that this Deva tells to Kumara. So he gives him an extended simile to consider, like a vision. Now, this must have been something suitable for this particular person, Kumara. Perhaps he was a very visual person. Perhaps he could understand, as many of us do, through stories, through similes, profound Dhamma. And so I'm going to speak about this sutta, and then we'll speak about the teaching of Ayya. Just seeing all your messages. Lovely to see you're present. Those who've dropped a note in the chat, welcome. So the Anthill Sutta, Vamika Sutta Majjhima 23. Vamika is an anthill or a termite mound. This is the Anthill Sutta, friends. On this occasion, the Buddha was living at Savatthi, Jeta's grove in Athapindika's park, and the Venerable Kumara Kassapa was living in the blind man's grove, or the dark forest. Actually, it's quite interesting that he was living in this forest, because no one else has ever been documented in the Pali Canon as having lived in the forest. People would go there to the blind man's grove, would plunge into the forest and spend the day after the alms round. You could say spend the afternoon meditating. This happened a lot. Many bhikkhunis, many bhikkhus spent time in this forest, the dark forest, but nobody else is said to have been living there. So that gives a bit of a sense of a monk who was very free from fear, free from agitation, living in this very dark wilderness of a place. So the sutta goes on. When the night was well advanced, a certain deity of beautiful appearance illuminated the whole of the dark forest. And he approached Kumara Kassapa and stood to one side. This is a very respectful way of approaching. It's very interesting. We can see again and again in the suttas how heavenly beings would visit bhikkhunis and bhikkhus, and always with great respect for their determination, for their lifestyle, monastic lifestyle, for their being followers of the Buddha. So he approached very respectfully this deity, and he said to him, "Bhikkhu, this anthill fumes by night and flames by day." So immediately it's kind of a very peculiar, one could say, introduction. What is he talking about? This is the beginning of this extended simile, friends. This anthill fumes by night and flames by day. Thus spoke the Brahmin. Delve with the knife, thou wise one. So we have an image here of an anthill, a person who has a knife, and a Brahmin who's with them, telling them to dig into this anthill. And so the person with a knife digs into the anthill. Delving with a knife, a wise one saw a bar, Venerable Sir. So the Brahmin speaks to the person, throw out the bar and dig again, delve again into the anthill. And so again, the wise one digs into the anthill and finds a toad. He's encouraged by the Brahmin to throw out the toad, dig deeper. And this time he finds a sieve. Throw out the sieve, dig deeper, he's told. And so he delves again with the knife and he unearths a tortoise. He's asked to throw the tortoise aside and dig again. And this time he unearths a butcher's knife and a block, a chopping board with a sharp knife. Throw it out, he's told by the Brahmin, dig again. And so he digs again and he finds a piece of meat, a scrap of meat. Throw out the scrap of meat, he's told by the Brahmin, dig deeper, and he finds deep at the bottom of the anthill a snake, a naga. Friends, even to this day in India, you get these huge termite mounds, and oftentimes, because they're warm, they're fuming by night and flaming by day, they're quite hot in the daytime and warm at night. Oftentimes snakes will go and burrow into the bottom of these termite mounds and have little dens in there. And even to this day in India, people have a kind of veneration of these snakes. And so they will make offerings sometimes to these termite mounds, treat them with great respect because of the snake that may be living inside the termite mound. So this is a very kind of, you can imagine, this whole imagery is very appropriate to the time and place where Kumara lives. And very visceral also when you consider what is an anthill, termite mounds seething with life, seething with agitation, never resting. The ants are constantly at work. And so the flaming by day, hive of activity by day, but also fuming by night, cooling down perhaps at night, but still a lot of activity in a anthill. So anyway, the sutta goes on. The Deva gives this simile, this image to Kumara of the man delving with a knife, unearthing object after object in the anthill, getting down to the snake, the naga. And the Deva then said, the Brahmin who's standing beside this person will then tell the person, leave the naga, honor the naga. The naga should be left alone. He then said to Kumara, Bhikkhu, you should go to the Buddha and tell him this story I've told you. Share with him this simile, this image, and ask him the meaning of it. And so Kumara does indeed, having received this gift, this heavenly visitation illuminating the forest. What an extraordinary experience. He remembered everything he was told. He sought out the Buddha, who fortunately was quite nearby in this case. And he explained to the Buddha what has happened. And so the Blessed One explains to him the meaning of this simile. Immediately, the Buddha gives him the meaning, It's not a puzzle or a mystery to the Buddha. And he says to him, what is the anthill? Fuming by night and flaming by day. The Buddha says the anthill is a symbol for this body, made up of material form, consisting of the four great elements, procreated by father and mother, built up out of boiled rice and gruel, and subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to dissolution and disintegration. The anthill is this body, and just as it's teeming with life and activity, so these bodies too, are they not? Teeming with activity, the blood pumping around the body, the lungs receiving the oxygen breath by breath, the eating, the excreting, the urinating, the drinking, the sweating, the movement that's constantly required. We can't sit still for long, can we, without having to change our posture, move around, eat or drink or go to the toilet, and so forth. So flaming by day and fuming by night. It's quite interesting to consider. In the daytime, we're thinking constantly, perhaps, many of us, cogitating, planning, preparing, exercising our mentality, and we get very hot. In fact, when we do that, when people meditate, their brains literally cool down. And so at night, when we go to bed and we're resting, things can cool down, but not cool down completely. Fuming by night, there's still a lot happening for us. Dreaming, where the mind is kind of sifting through the day's events and trying to make sense of, perhaps, or settle into processing. And so we flame by day and we fume by night. This is something to consider. The Buddha goes on to say, he says, what one thinks and ponders by night, based upon one's actions during the day, is the fuming by night. The actions one undertakes during the day, by body, speech, and mind, after thinking and pondering by night, is the flaming by day. In this simile, the Brahmin, the Buddha explains to Kumara, the Brahmin is a symbol for the Tathagata. The Buddha, whenever he referred to himself, he would use this word, the Tathagata, the thus gone, thus come, thus gone. That is the Brahmin in this simile, who's giving the advice to the wise one. The wise one is a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni in higher training, or we could consider, friends, it's anyone who's practicing for liberation, who's following the teachings of the Buddha. This is the wise one, the seeker. The knife with which they're delving into the anthill, this is wisdom, symbolic of wisdom. Our wisdom that, like the sword or the knife, can cut through delusion and that is probing to seek the truth of the way things are. This is the knife in this simile, and the delving is symbolic of the arousing of energy, right effort, that determination, that willingness to keep applying ourselves to the practice. In this case, this is the action of the delving of the knife, the action of wisdom. And the first thing that in the simile, this person digs out of the anthill is a bar. Bhante Sujato translates this as a sticking point, something sticky, something solid. We could say some kind of obstruction. If you bar a door, or you build a wall, you obstruct and separate and prevent movement. And in this way, this is the sense of the first thing that's unearthed. The bar, the Buddha says, this is the symbol for ignorance. And so it is, that which blocks us from seeing, that which is a stumbling block for our progress on the path. This is the first thing we have to confront, perhaps you could say, and we need to work through ignorance. How can we work through ignorance? By taking in the teachings of the Buddha and applying them. And then the next thing that's dug up from the anthill, the Buddha explains the toad that is unearthed. This is symbolic of anger and irritation. This for me is very resonant, because how easy it is for us to be irritated, to be defensive, to want to assert ourselves in some way or other when we have views that are different from those around us. Angry despair is described as one of the great hindrances in the monastic life, due to which people will often disrobe. And there are many stories of elder bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, people who ordain later in life, who are then being instructed by those younger than them, and how this can bring up great distress, anger, and despair in those who feel they have more life experience, they have more wisdom. And so this hindrance is something very challenging and something to be very careful around. The toad, like an ugly old toad. Sorry to toads, but this is the simile, like a toad that's squatting, kind of refusing to budge, croaking away, something a little bit unpleasant in this simile. And so consider that. The first obstacle for Kumara to consider was ignorance. The second, angry despair, irritability. And then what comes next out of the anthill, digging a bit deeper, there's a fork. And this, the Buddha said, is symbolic of doubt. We can be very careful of this hindrance when it arises. The fork, it's leading us astray. The divergence of views, the multiplicity of views, thinking. And so to allow ourselves, if we experience doubt, to see the fork for what it is and to throw it aside, put it aside. Don't go round and round in circles. Seek help when we feel we need to, and otherwise put that thinking aside and come back to the moment, to the reality of each moment. So doubt is the next. And then after the fork is thrown aside, what's dug up is a sieve. This sieve, the Buddha said, is a symbol for the 5 hindrances. That is sense desire, ill will, doubt again, lack of energy, sloth and torpor, or too much energy, restlessness. And so as we practice, friends, isn't it the case that we have to overcome a certain degree of ignorance? We have to let go of anger and irritability. We have to let go of doubt. And then we face up to the other hindrances, sense desire, sloth and torpor, and restlessness. And a sieve is a very interesting image, isn't it, for the 5 hindrances? In this case, a sieve, something leaky. It's like our energy, it's like the water. You put the water into a sieve and it keeps leaking away. When we have issues with the hindrances, when we allow the hindrances, too much of our energy, put too much of our attention into the experiencing of these hindrances, it's like we're a leaky sieve and all our energy goes astray. So when we encounter any of these 5, we want to be very alert and we want to see them for what they are. And in seeing them for what they are, seeing the sieve, we can toss them aside. When I'm full of sense desire or sleepiness, laziness or restlessness or agitation, can I know that for what it is? And when we see the hindrances for what they are, they will quite naturally subside. We've thrown the sieve aside. And the next thing that's unearthed here in the anthill is the butcher's knife and block. And the Buddha says, okay, this is simile. It means, it signifies sense pleasure. Sense pleasure like a cutting board and a knife. And this is really graphic, isn't it, friends? The sense of the danger, the damage that's done when we indulge in feeding and making much of delight. Taking pleasure in samsara is dangerous. And this is really helpful to consider because we're programmed, of course, to enjoying, delight in delight. And so to counter that, I feel the Buddha so often gave very graphic images to point out, to emphasize that there is a danger. When we indulge in sense pleasures, we're like the leaking sieve. We've given into sense desire. We'll lose all our energy and we endanger ourselves because we're putting ourselves in for signing up for more suffering, life after life after life. So the chopping board and the knife, it's like we're getting chopped up, chopped into pieces again and again. This acute sense of suffering that this image gives is something for us to counter our natural inclination to lean in towards delighting and pleasure, to incline towards more of that. Let's remember this simile of the chopping board and the sharp knife. Ouch. So having unearthed this, that is to realize this tendency, the danger here is to put it aside. And so in the simile, the Brahmin, the Buddha, tells the Seika, the student, put that aside. Don't fall for it. Don't get involved in pleasure. Step back from delighting. And your insight will grow. And you can keep digging deeper into the anthill. And what comes up next? What next emerges? A piece of meat, a scrap of meat. This simile of the meat, the Buddha said, this is also symbolic of desire, delight, and lust. So layer after layer, friends, we're dealing with our attachment, our delighting in sense pleasures, and layer after layer, we want to unearth, meet that tendency and allow ourselves to work with desire, not by indulging in what we want, but by feeling the energy of it, feeling that restlessness, that agitation, that yearning, that longing, and just being present for that. And in this way, we can emerge from it. We can toss aside the chopping board and the knife. We can toss aside the piece of meat. The piece of meat comes up in many places in the Pali Canon as a simile for the danger of sense delight. When you get what you want, when you get that delightful thing, it's like a bird who sees a piece of meat lying on the ground and she swoops down and she gets it in her beak and she's making off with it to feed her young ones or to feed herself. And what happens? the other birds see the piece of meat has been taken by this one, and they'll go after her, and they'll be pecking at her and plucking out her feathers and trying to get her out of the air and to seize that piece of meat from her beak. This is the danger of sense pleasures. You get what you want, and then there's the payback. It will come one way or another. There will be suffering as a result. And so to take on this image in the simile here in the Anthill Sutta is also, it connects with many other places in the Pali Canon where the Buddha speaks about the piece of meat, the scrap of meat, or the bone with a tiny piece of meat on it that the dog, is trying to get a meal out of, that's trying to get nourished from. And the dog can never get enough because there's just not enough there. There will never be enough. The more we want, the more we want. There's no end to that. The only way to meet that insatiable wanting is to work with the feeling of wanting, and through wisdom, delving with the knife, we get to see that wanting for what it really is. It's just an energy that comes and goes, and we can watch it arise and we can watch it pass away, and we're free. We're not slaves to sense desire. So this simile of the piece of meat comes up here in the anthill. It's the last thing that emerges. So it's the most deep-rooted source of our suffering. We can consider in this simile, for Kumara, this was the ultimate unearthing, the unearthing of the piece of meat, because next he's digging deep and he finds the naga, the serpent, the snake. And here the Buddha said, and he was told by the Deva, at this point, you stop digging and you honor the naga, honor the serpent. So the serpent gets to live in the anthill. The Buddha said the serpent here, the naga, this is the symbol for the arahant. So what is left when all these obscurations have been uprooted and thrown aside? What's left is the arahant. So friends, I encourage you to read the sutta again, Majjhima 23, and just to allow the mind to contemplate this image. It would make a beautiful painting, would it not, or piece of art, and I'm sure it's been done, to have the anthill and all its various layers with all these various items that are found, and right at the bottom, the naga, that's peacefully abiding. That is what's left. When a human being becomes fully liberated, there's still a body, but it is peaceful, and it knows stillness, and it is to be honored. So that is the Wammika Sutta that was given, simile that was given by the deity, the old and true friend to Kumara Kassapa, the bhikkhu. Coming back to his companion, their companion, many, many lifetimes ago, at the time of Kassapa the Buddha, Bahia was the one I told you about with the bark dress, who became a wanderer after being shipwrecked and became a very wise person who felt that he was an arahant, but he was mistaken. And his old friend, his true friend, the Deva in this lifetime, came to visit him and said to him, you need to seek one who truly is liberated. Go and find Gautama the Buddha. And being a deity, he could tell Bahia where to go to find the Buddha. And Bahia, so ready, so determined, so much striving for liberation, immediately took on what this deity was saying to him. He immediately accepted that he had more work to do, and he went straight away to seek out the Buddha. And one of the places where we find this story and this teaching for Bahia is in the Udana 110, which I put in the chat there for you. Bahia Sutta. I'd like to read you from this sutta. This very beautiful teaching many of you will be familiar with, where Bahia finds the Buddha and he's so determined to receive the Buddha's teaching that even though he's told when he arrives at Savatthi, where the Buddha's staying, the Buddha's actually, the Blessed One's actually on his arms round. This is not the time to disturb him. Even so, Bahia sought out the Buddha immediately. And so he asked him, please teach me the Dhamma. As soon as he saw him, please teach me the Dhamma. Teach the Dhamma to me for my sake, for my long-term benefit and happiness. And the Buddha said to Bahia, this is not the time. I'm collecting alms at this time. And a second time, Bahia approached the Buddha and begged him for a teaching. And second time was told to wait. And a third time, he begged for a teaching from the Buddha, even on his alms round. And the Buddha, after being asked 3 times, relented and gave Bahia this pithy, this short teaching, which many of you will be very familiar with. He said to him, Bahia, this is how you are to train yourself. In the seen, there will be just the seen. In the heard, there will be just the heard. In the sensed, let there be merely the sensed. In the cognize, let there be merely the cognized. This, Bahia, is how you are to train yourself. Bahia, when it is like this for you, when in the seen there's just the seen, in the heard there is just the heard, in the sense there is just the sensed, in the cognized there is just the cognized, then Bahia, there will be no you in terms of this. When there's no you in terms of this, then there is no you there. And when there is no you there, there is no you here or beyond or in between. This, just this, is the end of suffering. And while the Blessed One was teaching this brief Dhamma to Bahia, Bahia's mind was liberated from the corruptions by means of non-attachment. He let go. He understood immediately. He was so ready to receive this teaching from the Buddha. All the causes and conditions, his lifetime as a bhikkhu on the hilltop, determining to sit until he was liberated and dying in the attempt, his friendship with his brother who had broken through to becoming a non-returner, and this visitation from that true friend, that old friend, and the exhortation to go seek the Buddha, and the determination that took him from where he was far away to find the Buddha at Savatthi, and that momentum, that inspiration, that determination, that even the Buddha, he couldn't take no for an answer from the Buddha himself. Again and again, he approached the Buddha. I must hear this teaching now. And something in him must have realized also that there was a great urgency. He received the teaching, he understood the teaching, he immediately woke up. And then very shortly after, Bahia was killed while seeking a bowl and robe to become a bhikkhu. he was killed by a stray cow. And so this was indeed the time. This was the only time that Bahia could receive the teaching. And there was a great sense of urgency, perhaps a sense of premonition on his part. The Buddha, after Bahia died, in this teaching here in Udana, he asked the monks to take the body and to cremate it and to build a monument. And they asked him, after doing all of this, cremating the body that had been crushed by a cow of this wanderer who'd not yet become a bhikkhu, building a monument for this person, they asked the Buddha, what is the story with this person? What is the destination of this person? And the Buddha said, monks, Bahia was wise. He practiced Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. He did not concern me on account of the Dhamma, which is very interesting, considering how Bahia had approached the Buddha. But the Buddha was very pleased with Bahia. He said, monks, Bahia has attained final Nibbana. And then the Blessed One made this statement, friends. He said, where water, earth, fire, and air have no hold, where stars do not shine, and the sun has no radiance, where the moon does not glow, and darkness cannot be found. Where one personally knows this, a sage, a holy person of true wisdom, then from form, formlessness, pleasure, and pain, they are freed. Ayya. So thank you, friends, for lending ear. These teachings are very profound. There's so much more that could be said, but the time is short. Please consider reading these beautiful teachings from Udana 110, profound teachings of the Buddha, and particularly let's consider his teaching to Bahia, to let go of any sense of self around our experience. Whatever the sense doors receive, can it just be that? Seeing is just seeing, hearing just hearing, tasting just tasting, smelling just smelling, thinking just thinking, cognizing, consciousness, process of consciousness is just that. Not personal, not me, not mine, not connected through time, just this, moment by moment, Dhammas arising and passing. Bahia understood immediately, and the Buddha's beautiful explanation that if you're able to let go of self, there's no here, there's no there, there's no beyond, there's nothing in between. And these incredible verses explaining, pointing to the realization of full liberation, out of samsara, free from form and formlessness, free from pleasure and pain. And so we are freed, where water, earth, and fire and air have no hold, where the stars don't shine, the sun has no radiance, the moon doesn't glow, and darkness cannot be found. When one personally knows this, then form, formlessness, pleasure, and pain no longer exist. Can we perhaps not fully understand these teachings, but just let them sink in, let them percolate through the system? Consider that. That is that Nibbana is inexplicable to the thinking mind. We can't conceive of it. We can't know it in that way, but we can practice, friends, for liberation through letting go. We can let go of what we do know, and in this way we're moving towards this, indefinable freedom, this unshakability of the heart. So thank you again for your kind attention, and I really will stop here and have a look at the chat. And just seeing your names, it's a joy. Manala, Madeleine, and Margaret, King Nadish, Rebecca, Camino, Antiguo, Bhumika, Gregory, Jayantha, Gina, Sarah, Heike. Very good to see your names. Thank you for dropping a line in the chat. I'm not seeing any questions. Madeline says, I wonder if we'll ever make it to Nibbana. We don't need to wonder. We just need to keep practicing, and we surely will. We surely will. I want to wish you all blessings, and I won't be here next week, but hopefully beyond that, who knows? Hopefully we'll have a chance to offer Dharma again. Let's finish, friends, by paying homage to our great teacher and our truest friend, the Buddha. We'll say 3 sadhus. Sadhu, 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 animodan.